When I walked into my own bedroom, my daughter-in-law's mother's red suitcase was already on my bed. A thin gray blanket was waiting for me on the sofa. Then my daughter-in-law said, "The couch will do you just fine," while my son stood there and said nothing. "Don't make a scene, Martha. My mother just needs the room more right now," my daughter-in-law Chloe said as she pulled the front door shut. Right there on my mattress was a massive red rolling suitcase, and tossed onto the living room sofa was a thin, scratchy gray blanket. My son Tyler stood right beside her, staring down at his phone without saying a single word. This was my apartment, a 3-bedroom place I'd been paying the rent and utility bills for entirely on my own ever since my husband passed away. Tyler and Chloe lived with the 2 kids just 1 floor above me in the exact same building. Apparently, Chloe's mother had shown up out of the blue and decided on a whim to stay for a whole month. Without asking me or even dropping a hint, the 2 of them had completely hijacked my bedroom. Chloe marched straight into my kitchen, yanked open the fridge, and pulled out the deli meat I just bought fresh this morning from the grocery store. "You're always on your feet anyway, so the couch will do you just fine," she called out over her shoulder. In that exact moment, I didn't feel angry, and I didn't feel like crying. Instead, a cold, sharp clarity washed over me. Tyler glanced up from his screen for a split second and muttered half-heartedly, "Mom, please don't make this difficult. You know how chaotic things are upstairs for us right now." I didn't give him an answer. I picked up that cheap blanket from the sofa, folded it neatly, and set it on the armchair. On the kitchen counter, I noticed the heavy key ring Chloe had used to let herself in without my permission. Right next to it lay the newly printed daycare schedule for the grandkids, with my name already written in ink for every single afternoon. Chloe took a bite of her sandwich and said, "You need to pick up Leo tomorrow at 2. I just nodded in total silence. A line had been crossed. I didn't spend that night tossing and turning on the sofa. Instead, I sat down at my small kitchen table. While Chloe's mother slept soundly in my bed, I pulled out my thick accordion folder of bank statements. It was time for a brutal audit of my finances, something I had put off for far too long. I switched on the small desk lamp and went through every single automatic withdrawal and debit charge from the past few months. I started noticing expenses I just blindly accepted in my day-to-day routine. Every single month, I was paying $90 for Tyler's cell phone plan, something I'd set up for him back when he was a college student. Looking closer at the utility bills, I realized the shared electricity meter for the basement laundry area was hooked up entirely to my account, even though Chloe ran 2 loads of laundry up there every single day. The next morning at exactly 7, I heard heavy footsteps thudding through the stairwell. It was the designated day for our building's hallway cleanup. Normally, I would have grabbed the broom and swept the whole floor myself just to take some weight off Chloe's shoulders. But today, I stayed right where I was. I could hear Chloe's mother laughing loudly upstairs, and Tyler cranking up his car to head to work. At 8 o'clock, I walked down to the lobby mailboxes and retrieved a certified letter I'd overlooked the day before. It was a notice about a steep increase in my heating costs. I tucked the envelope into my purse and walked straight to the bank. At the teller window, I asked for a printout of my balance. The numbers didn't lie. Over the past 2 years, I had poured thousands of dollars into making my son and his wife's lives comfortable, while I didn't even have a bed to call my own anymore. I slid my debit card securely back into my wallet. At 1:45 that afternoon, I wasn't waiting outside the daycare gates like I usually was. Instead, I was sitting in a cozy little cafe downtown, taking my sweet time with a hot cup of coffee. My phone started buzzing relentlessly inside my purse right around 10 after 2. It was Chloe. When I finally picked up on the third try, she was practically screaming into the receiver. "Martha, where are you? The daycare director just called me at work. Leo is standing there completely by himself." My voice remained entirely level as I replied, "I'm at a cafe. Picking him up isn't my job anymore. You're an adult, so you can handle it like an adult." Before she could even utter a word back, I hung up and silenced the ringer. Then I took a leisurely walk back to the building. In the hallway, I ran into my neighbor Brenda, who was sorting out the recycling bins. I greeted her warmly and asked for a small favor, which she was more than happy to grant. The second I unlocked my apartment door, Chloe came storming toward me, practically breathing fire with Leo in tow. "How could you just leave us stranded like that?" she exploded. I walked right past her without a word and headed to the kitchen counter. I picked up the heavy key ring she'd left there the day before, unhooked the spare key to my front door with a quick, deliberate twist, and slid it deep into my pocket. "This is my key," I said coldly. Chloe stared at me dumbfounded. "We thought you loved feeling needed," she cried out. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I'm not arguing with you, Chloe. I'm letting you know." Just then, Tyler came down the stairs looking completely overwhelmed by the tension. Tyler immediately tried to play peacemaker, stepping right between us. "Mom, come on, don't make this so complicated," he said in that chronically exhausted voice of his. "Chloe is just stressed at work, and her mom has a terrible back, which is why she needs an actual bed." I looked at my son and saw the exact same little boy who used to run away and hide whenever things got tough. "Tyler," I said loud and clear, "your mother-in-law is sleeping in my bed while I'm expected to sleep on the couch. And you think that's normal?" He looked down at his shoes, grasping at straws for an excuse. Chloe scoffed bitterly from the background. "We're family, Martha. You don't nickel and dime family. We share this whole building anyway." That was exactly the opening I'd been waiting for. I walked over to the entryway, grabbed the printouts from the bank and the updated utility notice from my purse, and laid them flat on the table. "If we're not keeping track, then let's start today," I said calmly. "The automatic payment for your cell phone bill, Tyler, is canceled as of today. And the electricity costs for the laundry room are being split exactly 50-50 starting next month." Chloe's eyes went wide and she gasped for air. "You can't do that. We already have to pay a huge deductible on the car insurance this month," she protested. I shoved my hands into the pockets of my cardigan. "You're two working adults. You'll figure it out," I replied, matter-of-factly. Tyler opened his mouth to argue, but right then my phone rang from the kitchen. It was customer service from my bank, confirming a pressing appointment I'd requested earlier. I left them both standing in the hallway and walked into the other room to take the call, never looking back. 2 days passed in total icy silence throughout the building. Chloe's mother was still camped out in my bedroom while I had set up a makeshift camp in my small home office on a folding cot. On Friday evening, there was a loud, aggressive knock at my door. Tyler and Chloe were standing out there this time, holding an official-looking piece of paper. "Mom, we need to talk." Tyler began avoiding my eyes. Chloe took the reins immediately. "The daycare is closed all of next week for staff training. If you don't watch Leo and Clara, one of us has to take unpaid leave. That's going to cost us hundreds of dollars." She slammed the notice down on top of my entryway shoe rack. "You're home all day anyway, so this is the absolute least you can do, especially since we don't even ask you to pitch in for property upkeep," she added with a condescending smirk. I could feel them trying to squeeze me, trying to use guilt as a weapon. But the trap didn't snap shut this time. I picked up the paper, folded it neatly, and handed it right back to Chloe. "No, I am not doing that anymore," I said, my voice rock solid. Chloe's face flushed bright red. "You've become so incredibly selfish. What is wrong with you? We could lose our jobs because of you." She practically shrieked right there in the stairwell. A neighbor's door clicked open slightly down the hall. I remained completely unfazed, took a step back, and said, "I am not responsible for your child care scheduling. You could have asked me instead of taking over my room." Chloe spun around in a fury and hissed at Tyler, See what kind of person your mother really is." They stormed upstairs. I shut the door, locked it twice, and sat down at the kitchen table to map out my next move. On Saturday morning, I started putting my new independent life into motion. I didn't head over to the supermarket to buy groceries for the whole household. I bought only what I needed for myself. After that, I sat down at my computer and opened up Amtrak's booking site. I bought a round-trip train ticket to Boston for the upcoming week, the exact days the daycare was going to be closed. I wanted to visit my old college roommate, Valerie, whom I hadn't seen in years. Next, I called the electric company and requested a formal separation of the meters for the basement laundry area. The representative on the line was incredibly helpful and emailed me the confirmation details right away. While the documents were printing out, I could hear the kids stomping around upstairs. In the past, I would have run right up there to help out. But today, I stayed in my chair and kept reading my book. Later that afternoon, I went out to the yard. Tyler was leaning over the fence, changing a tire on the car. He looked drained and called out to me, "Mom, Chloe's mom isn't leaving for another 2 weeks. Can you at least help out with dinner on Monday?" I stopped by my flower bed, looked at him and said, "No, Tyler. I won't even be in the building come Monday. I'm taking a trip for a week." He dropped his lug wrench, staring at me like he'd just seen a ghost. "A trip? Where and who's supposed to watch the kids?" he asked, completely bewildered. "That's for you two to solve," I said as I walked past him. I went back inside, pulled my old suitcase out of the closet, and started packing. Monday morning went exactly the way I figured it would. I had my suitcase sitting right by the door when my apartment door suddenly flew open. Chloe had somehow gotten her hands on the emergency key I kept hidden in the kitchen cabinet, which Tyler must have told her about. She burst inside, dragging a crying Leo by the hand, and yelled, "I don't care if you're planning to go somewhere. I have a shift right now, and Tyler is out of town on a job. You are staying here." She tried to just leave the boy standing in the hallway and turn on her heel. That was her absolute biggest mistake. She genuinely believed that if she just pushed hard enough, I would eventually cave. I grabbed Chloe firmly but calmly by the arm, pulled her back inside the apartment, and shut the door. "Leo is going with you," I said in a tone that left absolutely zero room for debate. Leo instantly stopped crying and looked between the two of us with wide eyes. Chloe tried to yank her arm away. "You can't just throw a child out onto the street," she yelled hysterically. "I'm not throwing him on the street, I'm handing him to his mother," I replied coldly. I grabbed Leo's little backpack, shoved it into Chloe's hands, and ordered her to leave my apartment immediately. When she realized I wasn't budging even an inch, the rage on her face collapsed into sheer panic. She had never expected me to actually hold the line. She took the boy by the hand and went cursing down the hallway. I waited 5 minutes until the stairwell was completely quiet. Then I picked up my suitcase, locked up the apartment securely, and headed to the station to catch my train to Boston. That week in Boston with Valerie was like a breath of fresh air for my soul. We drank coffee by the harbor, visited museums, and talked for hours on end about the old days. My phone stayed completely turned off the entire time. When I finally got back Sunday evening and turned the key in my lock, the apartment was dead silent. I switched on the hallway light and walked straight into my bedroom. The massive red suitcase belonged to Chloe's mother was gone. My bed had been stripped and remade with fresh sheets, and there was a note from Tyler sitting on the dresser. I cracked the window open to let out the stale air and read what my son had written. He said his mother-in-law had cut her trip short because the atmosphere in the house had become completely unbearable. They'd been forced to pay a pretty penny for a private babysitter, and the separate electric bill for the laundry room had already hit their account. He asked if we could sit down for a serious talk the next day. I just gave a tired smile, tossed the note aside, and began unpacking my things in total peace. But during my time in Boston, I had made a major decision that was going to change the dynamics in this building for good. I walked over to the phone and called my neighbor Brenda. "Hi, Brenda, I'm back. Is our arrangement still on?" I asked. The answer on the other end was a resounding yes. The very next morning, the lease agreement for my spare office room would be officially signed. Brenda's granddaughter, who was moving to the city for college, desperately needed a place to stay and was moving in as my tenant. That meant my expenses were covered, and my apartment would never be left vulnerable again whenever I decided to travel. It didn't take long for the knock to come on Monday evening. Tyler was standing outside with a very subdued-looking Chloe trailing behind him. They stepped into the hallway, and I invited them to sit at the kitchen table where the brand-new paperwork was already laid out in plain view. Tyler cleared his throat nervously. "Mom, we're really sorry about how things handled. We know the thing with your bedroom wasn't right," he started. Chloe nodded silently, though she still looked incredibly tense. "We were just trying to save some money by having her stay down here," she added softly. "You were trying to save money at my expense," I corrected her instantly, keeping my voice purely professional. I pointed to the newly signed rental agreement sitting on the table. "This room is officially rented out starting the 1st of the month. Brenda's granddaughter is moving in. So the discussion about using my apartment as a guest house is permanently over." Whereas Chloe practically bolted out of her chair. "A stranger living in our building? You can't do that. What about our privacy?" She yelled, her old attitude flaring up. I looked her square in the eye. "This is my apartment, Chloe. I pay the rent, and I am the only one who decides who lives under my roof." Tyler caught his wife by the arm, pulling her back down. "Mom, can we please just talk about this? What are we supposed to do about the kids' daycare runs now? We're barely making it with the new utility splits." I shook my head. "No, I'm not locking myself into a schedule anymore. If I'm free and I feel like it, I'll see my grandkids. But my days as a free babysitter are over." Tyler looked at me, and for the first time in his life, he realized the old pushover version of his mother was gone for good. Neither of them said another word. The weeks that followed finally brought the peace and quiet I had been craving back into my life. Mia, the young college student, moved into the spare room right on schedule. She is incredibly sweet, polite, and spends most of her time at the university or studying quietly. Every now and then, we'll share a cup of tea in the kitchen in the evening and chat about her classes. The extra income from the rent, combined with the separated electric meters, made an immediate noticeable difference in my bank account. Upstairs, Tyler and Chloe's lives had shifted dramatically. They had to completely restructure their schedules and face the reality of a hectic daily routine without my constant unpaid labor to fall back on. Last Sunday, Tyler knocked on my door very softly. He was holding a small box of chocolates and asked me very politely if Leo and Clara could come sit with me in the garden for the afternoon. There were no demands, no guilt trips, and no unexpected intrusions with a spare key. I smiled and agreed, and we spent 2 wonderful hours out in the fresh air without Chloe interfering once. When the grandkids went back upstairs that evening, I sat out on my balcony with a good book, taking in the quiet twilight. I looked back inside at my clean, peaceful home and felt a deep wave of contentment wash over me. I had reclaimed my space and my dignity not through screaming matches or petty revenge, but through steady, unwavering boundaries. My life finally belonged to me again, and I looked forward to every single day ahead, lived entirely on my own terms.